My name is Eleanor, but people call me Ellie, and I'm 59 years old. I never imagined I'd be sitting in my quiet living room, staring at the bare wall where my grandmother's mirror used to hang. Or at the empty space in my cabinet where a set of silver I'd been saving for my daughter should have been. She sold it all. My daughter, the one I worked 2 jobs for, the one I poured my heart into raising, stood in front of me that day without a hint of shame. "I needed the money, Mom," she said, as if that excused the fact that she had stripped the very bones of our home. But the thing that cut deepest wasn't the jewelry or the furniture. It was the little brass house key I'd given her the day she moved into her own apartment. That key had meant freedom, safety, and trust. She sold the gifts, but she still held onto that key, dangling it on her chain like it was nothing. I didn't know then that those keys would become the last symbol of trust between us, the line between mother and daughter, between home and exile. And when she came back days later crying on my doorstep, saying she had nowhere to go, I had to decide, do I take her in, or do I finally close the door? Before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments. If stories like this one resonate with you, hit subscribe. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, the kind of place where everybody knew whose porch light was on and who left church early on Sundays. My parents weren't wealthy, but they were steady. My father worked at the factory, my mother sewed clothes for the neighbors, and together they built a modest but dependable life. From them, I learned that hard work was the only way to survive, and that love often showed itself in the quiet sacrifices no one else saw. When I had my daughter Claire, I swore I would give her more than I ever had. I was 32, already divorced, and determined to prove that I could raise her without needing a man to bail us out. I took whatever work I could find, clerical jobs, cleaning houses on weekends, even babysitting for neighbors after long shifts. There were nights when my legs ached so badly I cried in the shower just to let it out before putting on a smile for her. Still, every penny I saved seemed worth it when I saw Claire's eyes light up. She was a bright child, sharp with her words, funny in a way that caught people off guard. Teachers said she had promise. Relatives said she was spoiled. Maybe they weren't wrong. I remember the way she used to pout when I said no at the store. I could hold a line for myself, but not for her. I wanted her to have everything I never did, the new bike, the dance classes, the brand-name sneakers that made her fit in with the other kids. I justified it by telling myself it wasn't vanity, it was protection. If she had the right things, she wouldn't feel the shame I once carried when other kids noticed my thrift store dresses. The proof of my sacrifices lived in papers tucked away in a worn blue folder in the bottom drawer of my desk. Mortgage statements showing I paid late some months but never defaulted. Tuition receipts from community college courses I never finished because childcare came first. Hospital bills from the night Claire broke her arm at age 6 when I sat awake by her bedside, signing forms without knowing how I'd pay. And later, the papers that hurt most to look at, the retirement savings I cashed out early just to buy her a reliable car when she turned 16. Those papers weren't just documents, they were my life's trade-offs written in ink. Claire didn't see the papers, she only saw the outcomes, the car in the driveway, the dance recitals, the Christmas mornings when presents spilled from under the tree, though my fridge was near empty. I used to think she understood. She would hug me tight and say, "You're the best mom." But slowly, the hugs grew shorter and the gratitude became less sincere. One memory sticks. She was 12, and I gave her my mother's locket, a small silver oval with a picture of my parents inside. I told her, "This is part of where you come from." She smiled politely, then asked, "Does it have to be this chain?" It looks old. At the time, I brushed it off as a child's honesty. But looking back, I see the beginnings of her dismissal of sentiment for shine. As a teenager, Claire became restless. She wanted the newest phone, not the one I could afford. She wanted a spring break trip with friends, not a weekend camping in the mountains with me. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers crave independence. But there were cracks forming in the bond I thought was unbreakable. I worked harder to bridge the gap. Overtime shifts, late-night bookkeeping for a neighbor's small business. I skipped vacations, turned down dinner invitations, and lived simply so she could live better. At times, I caught myself wondering if I was raising her or rescuing her from the life I had lived. And maybe, In my effort to erase every shadow of my own childhood struggles, I created something else, a sense in her that love meant constant giving and that she was entitled to receive. I didn't want to believe it. I held on to warm memories instead. Like the way she used to climb into my bed on stormy nights, whispering, "Mom, don't let go." Or the sound of her laugh at 13, watching silly sitcoms with me, both of us eating microwave popcorn in mismatched pajamas. Or the day she graduated high school, smiling wide in her cap and gown, and I thought, naively, that I had done it. That the sacrifices were worth it. That she would take the foundation I laid and build something steady on it. But the signs were there. Her eyes lingered more on price tags than meaning. She rolled her eyes when I offered hand-me-down advice. She sold the locket I had given her on a second-hand app to buy a designer purse. When I asked about it, she laughed and said, "Mom, it was just a trinket." That was when I felt the first sting of distance, not just physical, but emotional. I realized she no longer saw my sacrifices as love, but as her due. And though I didn't know it yet, the gap between us was about to become a canyon, one I would either bridge with boundaries or fall into with blind devotion. The first time I realized something was wrong, it wasn't because Claire told me. It was because Mrs. Dwyer, the neighbor across the street from her apartment, stopped me one morning in the grocery store. She leaned closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing gossip she wished she didn't have to carry. "Ellie," she whispered, "I saw Claire outside on Saturday. She was selling furniture in the parking lot. I thought maybe she was moving?" My heart sank, but I brushed it off with a laugh I didn't feel. "Oh, I'm sure it was nothing," I said, but her words clung to me all afternoon. That evening, I drove over to Claire's apartment. The moment she opened the door, I knew. The space looked hollow. The oak coffee table I'd saved for months to buy, gone. The bookshelf I had given her when she moved out. Even the curtains I had sewn myself were missing, replaced with thin blinds. "Claire," I asked, my voice trembling, "where is everything?" She rolled her eyes the way she always did when she thought I was being dramatic. "Relax, Mom, I sold a few things." They were just taking up space. My chest tightened. "You sold the table? The bookshelf?" "Claire, those weren't just things. I worked for those. I gave them to you to make your place a home." She shrugged, tossing her hair over her shoulder. "They're just things. I needed the money." The words landed like stones. Just things. To her, the sweat on my back, the hours of lost sleep, the quiet sacrifices that shaped my life, all reduced to clutter she could trade for cash. I glanced around, and that was when my eyes fell on the empty corner shelf where a silver frame once sat. Inside that frame had been a family photo, me, her, and my parents on the day Claire was born. My father had been holding her with such pride, his hands still dirty from the factory, my mother wiping tears from her cheeks. It was the only photo I had of all of us together. "Claire," I whispered, "please don't tell me you sold the picture." She frowned as if it barely registered. "Oh, the old photo?" "Yeah, some collector said the frame was vintage. I don't even know what I got for it. $20 maybe." Her words sliced through me. $20. That was the price of my family's memory, of a moment that could never be recreated. I felt myself grow quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when anger is too heavy to lift. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just stood there, staring at the hollow room and wondering how the girl I had raised could see value in everything except the love behind it. She noticed my silence and grew defensive. "Don't look at me like that. You don't understand what it's like to need money right now. I can handle it, Mom. I don't need your guilt trip." I wanted to argue, to shake her into understanding, but the words wouldn't come. My hands ached from holding back the urge to grab her shoulders, to force her to see the weight of what she had done. Instead, I reached into my purse and touched the spare keys I carried, the ones I had given her when she first moved here. Those keys had been a promise that no matter what, she always had a way back home. Now, sitting later in my car, I held them tightly in my palm, their edges cutting into my skin. They felt less like a gift and more like a question. Was I still her safe place, or just another thing she would trade away? In the days after I discovered Claire had sold nearly everything, I couldn't stop replaying it in my mind. The empty shelves, the missing frame, her words, They're just things. I tried to convince myself she was going through a phase, that maybe she just needed quick cash and would replace everything later. But deep down, a seed of dread had taken root. Why did she need the money so badly? I knew her rent was manageable, and she had a steady enough job at the salon. It didn't add up. Unless someone else was involved. I remembered her boyfriend, Tyler. He was charming in that slick, too easy way that makes a mother's stomach twist, always with the newest sneakers, the shiniest phone, but never holding down a job longer than a few months. I had seen the way Claire lit up around him, desperate for his approval. I wondered if she was selling pieces of her life just to keep up with his lifestyle. That thought festered until I couldn't ignore it. One Saturday, I drove back to her apartment, unannounced. The moment she opened the door, I saw even more of her world stripped bare. The dresser was gone. The rug I bought her when she moved in, even the small kitchen set I gifted her when she got her first job, had disappeared. What was left were just walls and scattered clothes, like a life unraveling before my eyes. "Claire," I said carefully, "where is everything else?" She sighed loudly. "Mom, I told you, I needed the money." Don't start again. But I wasn't satisfied. I stepped inside, my eyes scanning for answers. That's when I noticed a crumpled pile of papers stuffed into the corner of a drawer she'd left open. At first, I thought they were old bills. But when I picked one up, my heart dropped. It was a loan statement. High interest. Past due. There were several more, each one more alarming than the last. Payday loans, credit card bills, even a notice about an overdraft account. "Claire," I whispered, holding them in my trembling hands. "What is this?" She grabbed the papers quickly, her face hardening. "That's none of your business." "None of my business?" "You're drowning in debt, selling off everything just to keep up, and I'm supposed to pretend it doesn't matter?" She glared at me. "I don't need a lecture. I can handle it." But I knew she couldn't. The signs were everywhere. The missing furniture, the sudden mood swings, the way she avoided eye contact. She wasn't just careless, she was spiraling. I left that day with my heart heavy. The image of those papers burned into my mind. At home, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the folder where I kept all my own deeds and receipts. Proof of my sacrifices, stacked neatly in order, a life held together by discipline. And then I pictured hers, crumpled, discarded, hidden in a drawer she couldn't bear to face. I wanted to step in, to clear her debts, to save her from herself. But another voice inside me whispered, "If you do it now, she'll never learn. She'll keep sinking, and you'll drown with her." I confided in my friend Linda over coffee. She had watched me raise Claire, knew the history. "Ellie," she said firmly, "don't let her drag you down. You've done enough. Sometimes the kindest thing is to let them hit bottom." I wanted to believe that. But every instinct in me, every fiber of my being as her mother, wanted to shield her, even from herself. Over the next few weeks, I tried to keep contact, to offer support without smothering. But Claire grew more defensive. Calls ended abruptly. Texts came late, short, sometimes not at all. "Busy," she'd say, "don't worry," yet the worry consumed me. Once, when I stopped by, Tyler answered the door. His smile was too practiced, his tone too casual. "She's not here right now, but she's fine," he said, leaning against the doorframe like he owned the place. I noticed behind him the emptiness, more things gone, more shadows in a space that used to be full. By the time Claire called me next, her voice was sharp, almost brittle. "Stop checking on me, Mom. I don't need you breathing down my neck. I'm not a kid." Her words stung, but underneath I heard the fear she wouldn't admit. Something was unraveling faster than she could control, and she didn't want me to see it. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of my old house. My eyes drifted to the blue folder in my desk drawer, the one that held all the papers proving my resilience. And I thought of Claire's drawer, the crumpled debts, the hidden evidence of a life lived recklessly. The contrast was unbearable. It was like staring at a before and after picture of the same bloodline. I told myself there would be a breaking point. Something bigger was coming, a downfall she couldn't charm or shrug her way out of. I didn't know when it would arrive, but I felt it pressing closer every day, like a storm gathering at the edge of the horizon. And when it came, I knew I would have to choose. Not just between helping or withholding, but between saving her and saving myself. I thought I had seen the worst of it, the missing furniture, the debts, the hollow look in Claire's apartment. But I was wrong. What she had already sold was nothing compared to what I soon discovered. It happened on a rainy Thursday when I stopped by unannounced again. She wasn't home, but the door was unlocked, and worry got the better of me. Inside, the apartment felt even emptier than before. The last of the furniture was gone, the walls bare. I opened a closet, hoping to see at least the boxes I had packed for her future. The set of cookware I bought on clearance and saved for when she'd move into a house. The quilts my mother had made, the unopened boxes of dishes I told her to keep safe. All gone. My heart pounded as I searched. Then I noticed an envelope on the counter with her name scribbled across it. Inside were receipts, not for groceries, not for rent, but for luxury items. Designer handbags, electronics, expensive shoes. She hadn't been selling to survive. She'd been selling to spend, as though the future I built for her was nothing but currency for fleeting pleasures. And then I saw his name, Tyler, listed on one of the invoices. He had signed for items in her name. Suddenly, everything clicked. She hadn't been doing this alone. She was being manipulated, her generosity twisted into recklessness, her love exploited. When she finally came home, I confronted her. My voice shook, but I forced the words out. Claire, you sold everything I saved for you, everything meant for your future. For handbags? For him? She froze, then her face hardened. Don't go through my stuff, Mom. You have no right. No right? My voice cracked. I worked my entire life to give you these things. They weren't just objects, they were pieces of me. And you traded them for garbage. They're mine, she shouted back, her cheeks flushed. You gave them to me so I can do what I want. I don't need you controlling me anymore. I don't need you, period. I can take care of myself. Her words were knives, cutting deeper than she could know. I opened my mouth to plead, to remind her of who I was, what I had done. But before I could, she yanked the chain from around her neck and threw the little brass spare key onto the table. It clattered loudly, the sound echoing in the empty apartment. There, she hissed. You want your house back? Fine. Keep it. I don't need your keys or your pity. I stared at that small piece of metal lying cold against the wood. That key had once meant trust. It had meant she belonged. Now it was nothing but rejection, her way of saying I no longer had a place in her world. She stormed past me, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, and I stood there staring at the key, realizing I had just lost more than furniture, more than money, more than gifts. I was losing my daughter piece by piece, choice by choice, until there might be nothing left of the bond we once shared. I picked up the key, my hand trembling. It was heavier than it should have been, as though it carried the weight of every sacrifice I had made, every hope I still clung to. I pressed it into my palm and whispered to no one, Please, God, don't let this be the end of us. But deep down, I feared it already was. The weeks after Claire threw the spare key on the table felt like a slow unraveling of a thread I had no power to stop. At first, I tried to believe she would land on her feet, that the money from selling my gifts and the luxury items she flaunted would somehow sustain her. But reality came quickly, as it always does when foundations are built on sand. One afternoon, Linda came by with a look on her face that told me she had news I wouldn't want to hear. She leaned against my kitchen counter, arms folded. Ellie, she said carefully, I heard from a friend who lives near Claire's place. There's an eviction notice on her door. I closed my eyes, the words sinking deep. Eviction. That meant she hadn't been paying rent, even after selling everything she owned. My mind filled with questions. Where had the money gone? Was Tyler still in the picture? Was she even eating? Later that week, I drove past her apartment. Linda was right. The notice was plastered across the door in bold red letters. The sight nearly brought me to my knees. The following days revealed more cracks. Lights in her windows went dark, even when she was home. Her water was shut off. Friends who used to crowd her living room were nowhere to be seen. I'd see her walking alone down the street, shoulders hunched, her usual confidence stripped away. And yet, she didn't come to me. Not then. The community noticed. Whispers followed me in the grocery store, at church, even in line at the post office. It's such a shame, they'd murmur. She wasted everything her mother gave her. Some shook their heads with pity, others with judgment. Each word was another stone on my back, though none of them carried the full weight I did. At night, I sat at my kitchen table with the blue folder spread open before me, the mortgage deed, the tuition receipts, the stack of bills I had fought tooth and nail to pay off. Proof of what I had built through discipline and sacrifice. Beside those papers lay the brass key she had thrown back at me, cold and useless now. I stared at the contrast, my carefully kept records of survival and her crumpled debts hidden in a drawer. 2 lives connected by blood, separated by choices. The war inside me grew unbearable. The mother in me wanted to drive to her, pull her into my arms, and fix it all. But another voice whispered, "If you rescue her now, she'll never change. She'll keep repeating this cycle until there's nothing left to lose." The first call came late one evening. My phone lit up, her name flashing across the screen. My heart leapt, relief surging, but when I answered, her voice was shaky. "Mom," she whispered, "I need help. They're shutting everything off. I don't have food. Please." Tears filled my eyes. I wanted to say yes immediately, to rush to her side. Instead, I gripped the phone tighter and forced myself to pause. "Claire," I said gently, "you made choices. Choices that can't be undone overnight." She snapped back, her desperation turning to anger. "So what? You're just going to let me starve?" "Some mother you are." Then she hung up. I sat there in silence, the phone still warm in my hand, my chest aching. The guilt was suffocating, but beneath it was something else, resolve. I couldn't save her every time she fell. Over the next few nights, the calls became more frequent. Sometimes she was crying, sometimes furious, sometimes eerily calm. "Just a little money," she'd beg. "I promise I'll pay you back." Each time I hesitated, torn between love and tough love. Each time I said less, offered little, clung to the hope that letting her face the storm would teach her more than bailing her out ever could. I watched from afar, like a sentry powerless to intervene. Her world was crumbling. The eviction loomed closer, the utilities remained off. Friends vanished the moment the parties ended and the money dried up. She had no one left. The consequence I had feared for months was finally here, pressing down on her shoulders. And though my heart screamed to interfere, I held myself still. Because I knew this wasn't the end yet. The real breaking point hadn't come. It was approaching, inevitable, like thunder rolling closer before a storm breaks, and when it did, I would have to face the hardest choice of all. It was a rainy Friday night when the storm finally broke. I was curled up on the couch, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, when the pounding started. Not a polite knock. Desperate, frantic, like someone fleeing a nightmare. I rushed to the door, and there she was. Claire, my daughter. My only child. Her mascara streaked down her face, her hair matted from rain, and beside her sat a single battered suitcase. She clutched it like it held the last pieces of her soul. "Mom," she sobbed, her voice breaking, "they kicked me out. I have nowhere to go." For a heartbeat, I froze. Every instinct screamed to pull her in, wrap her in a blanket, feed her soup, tell her it would be okay. But my hand lingered on the doorframe, blocking the threshold. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I couldn't just fling it open as if nothing had happened. I swallowed hard. "Claire," I whispered, my voice trembling, "what happened?" She hugged herself, shivering. I messed up. Okay? I trusted the wrong people. Tyler's gone. My friends, they don't answer anymore. I sold the things you gave me, everything. I thought I was being smart, thought I could handle it, but I lost it all. The words pierced me, but they weren't new. I'd known, seen it coming, heard the whispers. I studied her, the rain dripping from her jacket, her shoulders hunched in shame. "Everything?" I asked slowly, holding her gaze. Her lips trembled. She nodded. "The jewelry, the furniture, the savings. Even the car." My breath caught. That car had been my late husband's, a piece of him I had kept alive through her. "You sold the car?" She flinched under my tone. I needed the money. And Tyler said we'd double it, that he had a business plan, but he lied. He took it all. Rage boiled in my chest, not just at Tyler, but at her blind faith, her disregard for everything I had given, yet beneath it, sorrow tugged at me harder. But then she said the words that changed everything. I signed some papers too, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Alone. I thought it was small, just a lease. But it was in your name too. I didn't realize until the collectors came. The world seemed to tilt. My knees weakened. What did you just say? Her eyes filled with panic. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to. Tyler said it was just a formality, that it was safer to put it with your info. I thought, you put debt in my name? My voice rose, shaking. You risked my home? My security? After everything I've done? Tears streamed down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. She dropped to her knees, clutching my hand. Please, Mom, I'm scared. I have nowhere to go. You're all I have left. I wrenched my hand away, my heart splitting in two. All the nights I had stayed up working double shifts, the vacations I skipped, the meals I stretched to make ends meet, all so she could have a better life. And here she was, not only throwing it all away, but endangering the very roof over my head. Inside my pocket, my fingers brushed against the familiar cool metal of the spare key, the one she had once tossed back at me. The symbol of trust between us. I pulled it out slowly, letting it rest on my palm. Her eyes widened when she saw it. Please, she whispered. Give it back. Let me in. I'll change this time, I promise. The rain pounded against the porch roof, drowning out the silence between us. My chest ached with the weight of a mother's love battling a woman's need for survival. I gave you everything, I said softly, tears blurring my vision. And you sold it all. Not just things, Claire, you sold memories. You sold my trust. And now, you've risked the only thing I have left. My home. She sobbed harder, her hands reaching out like a child begging for comfort. I didn't mean to. I'll fix it, Mom. I swear I'll fix it. Just let me stay here. Please, don't shut me out. The brass key glinted in the dim porch light, heavy in my hand. This was it, the moment, the choice that would define us. My heart wanted to hand it back, to let her collapse into my arms, to save her like I always had. But my mind screamed that if I opened that door, if I gave her the key again, it would never end. She would drag me into the same pit she had fallen into, and neither of us would escape. I closed my fist around the key. No, Claire, I said, my voice breaking but firm. Not this time. Her face crumpled, devastation pouring out of her like the rain. Mom, she cried, clawing at the suitcase as if holding on to it would keep her grounded. You can't do this to me. You're my mother. I stepped back, the key clenched tightly, and whispered the hardest words I had ever spoken. And because I'm your mother, I can't let you destroy me too. The door closed slowly between us, her sobs echoing through the wood like a haunting. I leaned against it on the inside, the tears streaming down my cheeks, the key digging into my palm. She was out there, broken, begging. I was in here, shattered but standing, and in that moment I knew sometimes love meant closing the door. I didn't sleep that night. Her cries outside the door echoed long after the storm passed, and the image of her hunched against her suitcase haunted me. No matter how deep the betrayal, she was still my daughter. By morning, my resolve had softened, but not broken. When I opened the door at dawn, she was there, curled up on the porch, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. The suitcase was clutched to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Her eyes fluttered open when she heard me. Mom? She whispered, her voice raw. I sighed, my heart aching. You can come inside. But listen carefully, Claire. This isn't a free ride. You're not moving back into your old life. If you stay, it's under my rules. She nodded quickly, too desperate to argue. I gave her a blanket, set her at the kitchen table, and poured her a cup of coffee. Then, calmly, I laid out the terms. You will get a job. Any job. You will contribute to this household rent, utilities, groceries. You will clean up after yourself, and you will respect this home. "You broke my trust, Claire, and trust has to be earned back. If you can't agree to this, you cannot stay." Her lip quivered, but she whispered, "I agree." And so began her slow climb back toward humility. The first week was the hardest. She sulked at first, complaining about the early mornings, the chores, the constant search for work. But I didn't bend. When the dishes piled up, I handed her the sponge. When the cupboards grew thin, I gave her the grocery money with a strict budget and made her plan the meals. She grumbled, but she did it. By the second week, she came home one afternoon with news. "I got a job," she said quietly. "It's just at the diner down the road. Minimum wage. But it's something. For the first time in months, pride flickered in my chest. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was honest. Each paycheck, she handed me a portion for the bills. At first reluctantly, then with a small measure of pride, as if even she could feel the dignity in contributing. She swept the floors, folded laundry, cooked simple meals. It wasn't perfect, she still had sharp edges, still bristled at my rules. But the change was there, slow and undeniable. The symbol of it all was the key. I kept it in the top drawer of my nightstand, where I could see it each evening. She knew it was there, but I never offered it. Sometimes I caught her glancing toward the drawer, her eyes full of longing, but she never asked. That restraint spoke volumes. Months passed. The debts she'd tangled me in were still being unraveled, but I handled them carefully, with help from the bank and a lawyer. It was exhausting, but I managed. And as I worked, I watched my daughter rebuild herself from the ground up. One evening, as we washed dishes side by side, she spoke softly. "I didn't realize how much you gave me until I had to earn it myself. I'm sorry, Mom." Truly. I looked at her, water dripping from my hands, and I saw not the reckless girl who had squandered everything, but a young woman humbled by her mistakes. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't healed, but it was a start. Weeks later, I opened the nightstand drawer, held the spare key in my palm, and weighed it carefully. When she came into the room, I extended my hand. Her eyes widened, filling with tears. "I'm not giving this back to you just as a daughter," I said. "I'm giving it back because you've begun to prove yourself. Don't make me regret it." She took it slowly, reverently, and for the first time in years, I believe she understood what it meant. The house was still mine, the dignity was still mine. But now, the door between us wasn't locked in anger, it was opened by choice under conditions of respect. Our relationship wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was real, grounded in truth, boundaries, and hard-earned lessons. And as I watched her slip the key onto her ring, I knew I had taken back control, and in doing so, given her the chance to finally grow. If you've listened this far, you know my story isn't just about a daughter who lost her way. It's about a mother who nearly lost herself trying to save her. I spent years believing love meant giving and giving and giving more. I thought sacrifice was the highest form of motherhood. But here's the truth I learned the hardest way. Giving too much without boundaries can destroy the very people we love. What I gave Claire, money, gifts, keys, freedom, it didn't make her stronger. It made her careless. She never had to learn resilience because I was always there to cushion the fall. When she sold everything, when she risked even the roof over my head, it felt like a betrayal. But in a way, it was also a mirror. It showed me how my endless saving had enabled her to sink deeper. The keys, the deeds, the gifts, they were all symbols. They carried weight because I poured my heart into them. But what mattered more was something I almost lost in the process, my dignity, my self-respect. Without that, there would have been no home for her to return to, no lessons left to teach. And I had to learn this. Sometimes the hardest way to love your child is to stop saving them. To let them feel the cold, the hunger, the emptiness that choices bring. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much to let them stay broken. I don't pretend that our story has a perfect ending. Claire and I are still finding our footing. She still makes mistakes. I still wrestle with guilt. But we live in truth now, not in the shadow of what I sacrificed. She knows there are lines she cannot cross. And I know that love, without respect, becomes a prison. So if you're listening to me right now and you've given too much, if you handed over money, time, second chances until you feel like there's nothing left of you, I want you to hear me. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not unloving for saying enough. Sometimes that's the only way your child or anyone you love will ever grow. Have you ever given too much only to watch it thrown away? Have you faced that painful decision between rescuing someone or protecting yourself? I want to hear your story. Share it with me in the comments. I promise you're not alone. And if my story touched you, if you felt even a spark of recognition, please subscribe. I share these stories not just for myself, but for all of us who've walked through betrayal, sacrifice, and redemption. Because sometimes the voices of our stories, our mistakes, our lessons, our triumphs, are the only map another woman needs to find her own way home.